Harris, thank you, thank you. I talked that whole time on mute. Oh man, that's awesome. So anyway, I'm gonna say all that again. Um, Today's a very special stream, and what we're gonna be doing on this stream is we're gonna be doing my regular sermon preparation, but we're gonna be doing it utilizing the Pastor Tanner study bundle on Logos. So if you go to logos.com/Pastor Tanner, you'll be able to see the links there. Thank you so much, Jay Harris. Appreciate you. You'll be able to see the links there for the Pastor Tanner study bundles. I've partnered up with Logos Bible Software to actually release some hand-curated and selected study bundles. We've got a small, a medium, and a large, and they're all resources that I have gone out of my way to highlight. The vast majority of the resources in each of these study bundles are hand-selected by me. And so it was cool to be able to work with the Logos team on this. And what I've done here is I've got a separate account, and this separate account has only the Pastor Tanner study bundle in the small version unlocked. And so I want to show you how you can prepare a sermon utilizing just the Pastor Tanner study bundle on logos.com/Pastor Tanner. And again, this is the small one. Next sermon prep, I think I'm want to do the large, or excuse me, the medium, and then the one after that, I think I want to do the large. So here's some links that you guys can go ahead and click, affiliate links, all that type of stuff. Hello, KC, good to see you. Welcome, welcome. But that's what we have right here. So my passage, my text for this upcoming Sunday is in John chapter 18, verses 28 to 38, all about Pilate. Okay, so that's going to be our focus. John 18, 28 to 38, all focused on the figure of Pilate. So I'll go ahead and open my Bible here. And you can see these do not have my current settings that I typically use, right? Because like I said, this is a separate account that has everything at the, do I use 200%? Maybe I use 175. This is a separate account that has only the Pastor Tanner study bundle small opened in it. Ooh, 160 is way too much for this. Maybe 120 on this one. That's probably good. Probably good enough. So that's the idea. Yeah, that looks pretty close to what I typically do. I don't have my prioritization set, I don't think. Prioritize books. None here. You can see just the CSB, right? So, man, I'll even show you how to use it without having any prioritized books. If you use your left and right arrow, you can just scroll through the different Bible versions here. If you click the tab. So there's the ESV, NIV, King James, New Living, New King James, Lexham English, American Standard, Message, Darby, Young's, Geneva, NET. And then, of course, our Greek. Perfect. This is awesome, guys. I'm very excited that we're going to get the opportunity to do this. So again, I'm going to be putting out a video in the near future on the study bundles themselves and why I selected the resources that I selected for each of them. But I wanted to show you guys, again, practically how I would go ahead and go about preparing a sermon on these passages. So the first thing is to read the text, and here we want 1828, and yeah, I've already done this one. So it's actually 33 to 38 for Pilate. And then I wanted to do 39 and 40 separately with Barabbas. So yeah, let's do 33. John 18, 33 to 38. John 18, 33 to 38. And what I like to start with is, I like to start with the more dynamic equivalent translations. So let's start with the Message. I had them include this deliberately. Again, I like a wide range of Bible translations. So I like to have some dynamic equivalents, some and some that are more formal equivalents to compare and contrast. And I think it's helpful to read the dynamic equivalent ones first before the formal equivalence ones, because you're getting that kind of more, I don't know how to put it, colloquial way of hearing it. All right, Pilate went back into the palace and called for Jesus. He said, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Are you saying this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Oh, I messed up here. No, 28 was correct. Peter denied it, the rooster crowed. Yeah, it is starting in 28. I made a mistake. How is the Logos integrated AI? Jay Harris, I think it's excellent. I really enjoy the search function with it because it can go about your entire library and pull out key resources. I'll just give an example. This last Sunday, I decided that I needed to treat the topic of spiritual strength, developing your spiritual strength. And so I just typed in into the search with the AI, how do I know if I'm spiritually strong or something like that? And I got 2 sermons from real old preachers, and quotes from them both made it into my sermon. So I wouldn't have known to check sermons, from Puritans. There's so many out there, right? It can be really difficult to try and search for those things if you don't have something like an AI search. So yeah, I have found it to be extremely helpful, that AI search, for exactly that purpose. All right, so the Message is the first one, and then after that we'll consult NLT, then NIV, and then we'll get into our more formal equivalents. We'll consult the ESV, CSB, etc. They led Jesus then from Caiaphas to the Roman governor's palace. It was early morning. They themselves didn't enter the palace because they didn't want to be disqualified from eating the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and spoke, "What charge do you bring against this man?" They said, "If he hadn't been doing something evil, do you think we'd be here bothering you?" Pilate said, "You take him, judge him by your law." The Jews said, "We're not allowed to kill anyone." This would confirm Jesus' word, indicating the way he would die. Pilate went back into the palace and called for Jesus. He said, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Are you saying this on your own, or did others tell you this about me?" Pilate said, "Do I look like a Jew? Your people and your high priest turned you over to me. What did you do?" "My kingdom," said Jesus, "doesn't consist of what you see around you. If it did, my followers would fight so that I wouldn't be handed over to the Jews. But I am not that kind of king, not the world's kind of king." Then Pilate said, "So, are you a king or not?" Jesus answered, "You tell me. Because I am king, I was born and entered the world so that I could witness to the truth. Everyone who cares for truth, who has any feeling for the truth, recognizes my voice." Pilate said, "What is truth?" Then he went back out to the Jews and told them, "I find nothing wrong with this man. It's your custom that I pardon one prisoner at Passover. Do you want me to pardon the king of the Jews?" He shouted back, "Not this one, but Barabbas." Barabbas was a Jewish freedom fighter. End quote. So you can see here, it's nice and colloquial, very easy to read, but you don't want to confuse this with the original autographs in the Greek, right? That's not what it is. So as long as you know what you're reading, to me, that's valuable. So that's the Message. Let's go to the NLT now and see how it changes. And then we'll do the NIV. Jesus' trial before Caiaphas ended in the early hours of the morning. Then he was taken to the headquarters of the Roman governor. His accusers didn't go inside because it would defile them, and they wouldn't be allowed to celebrate the Passover. So Pilate, the governor, went out to them and asked, "What is your charge against this man?" "We wouldn't have handed him over to you if he weren't a criminal," they retorted. "Then take him away and judge him by your own law," Pilate told them. "Only the Romans are permitted to execute someone," the Jewish leaders replied. This fulfilled Jesus' prediction about the way he would die. Then Pilate went back into his headquarters and called for Jesus to be brought to him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked him. Jesus replied, "Is this your own question, or did others tell you about me?" "I am a Jew." Am I a Jew?" Pilate retorted. "Your own people and their leading priests brought you to me for trial. Why? What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. If it were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders. But my kingdom is not of this world." Pilate said, "So you are a king?" Jesus responded, "You say I am a king. Actually, I was born and came into this world to testify to the truth. All who love the truth recognize that what I say is true." "What is truth?" Pilate asked. Then he went out again to the people and told them he is not guilty of any crime. There you go. Amaris, what is up? Look at the man reading the Message. I heard that's a capital offense in some seminaries. That's right. You got to be careful. Now I moved on to the New Living. How you doing, Amaris? I'm highlighting the Pastor Tanner study bundles that are now available in Logos Bible software. Pretty excited to be able to share these with everybody. And here's my links if you're interested. Oh, all right. So the NLT, pretty good, pretty good. Let's go ahead and head over to NIV now. Starting in 28. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace, because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it that you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest before the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. With this, he went out again to the Jews, gathered there, and said, "I find no basis for charge against him." All right. Let's go. I'd like to do CSB, and then we'll do ESV. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They did not enter the headquarters themselves. Otherwise, they would be defiled and unable to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and said, "What charge do you bring against this man?" They answered him, "If this man weren't a criminal, we wouldn't have handed him over to you." Pilate told them, "You take him and judge him according to your law." "It's not legal for us to put anyone to death," the Jews declared. They said this so that Jesus' words might be fulfilled, indicating what kind of death he was going to die. Then Pilate went back into the headquarters, summoned Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Are you asking this on your own, or have others told you about me?" "I'm not a Jew, am I?" Pilate replied. "Your own nation and the chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" "My kingdom is not of this world," said Jesus. "If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I wouldn't be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." "You are a king then?" Pilate asked. "You say that I'm a king," Jesus replied. "I was born for this, and I have come into the world for this, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." "What is truth?" said Pilate. After he said this, he went out to the Jews again and told them, "I find no grounds for charging him." All right, and the final one. So you can see they're getting quite similar at this point. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered him, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." The Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken, to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from the world." Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And after he said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him." End quote. All right, so you can see we referenced 5 separate Bible translations. There's a few more in the study bundle, but these are some of the key ones that, to me, give you a nice range, right? You are getting your formal equivalents from the ESV and from the CSB, and then you're also getting your dynamic equivalents from the Message, the NLT, and the NIV. right? So there we go. Here is a pretty good start. Now, what resources have I included in the small study bundle to help you in your sermon preparation process? Well, I have included some resources to help you with the original languages. So we'll go ahead and move on to that next. The key resource that I've asked to have included is Philip Comfort's New Testament Text and Translation Commentary. Okay. This one I find to be very helpful for just highlighting the high level differences in the text. All right. And so we can see I've done verses 28 to 38. So we don't need 1824, but right here, 1837 and 38 is going to give us some information on alternative textual variants. So it says Pilate's words, ukun basilus a su, are treated as a question in NA 27 and UBS 4 and by nearly all translations. The NIV, however, translates this: "You are a king then." We just read that. This rendering may be supported. Oh, I didn't mean to highlight. There we go. This rendering may be supported by one 2nd century manuscript, P90, which has su a, the inversion suggesting an emphatic declaration instead of a su, which is more suggestive than interrogation. Jesus' following response suggests that Pilate was not asking a question but making a declaration, whether sincere or sarcastic. In effect, Jesus was saying, "You said it," when he answered, "Su leges hati basilus ami." You said it, I am a king. This is similar to his response in Matthew 26:64. Su epas, you said it. Jesus then went on to explain that his kingly mission was to conquer by proclaiming the truth. End quote. So we can see we got a good quote here. And now we know a little bit of nuance surrounding some textual variants. So Philip Comfort. And we got our quote right there. Perfect. All right. Well, let's keep going. The next resource that I think you're probably going to find helpful for looking into original languages is the exegetical summaries. So we'll go ahead and open our exegetical summary on John. Oh, those aren't in the small package. No problem. We still have exactly what we need. We can first, let's try to see the exegetical guide. Exegetical guide. And in this one, we will put our text. John 18:28 to 38. Hello, Giovanno. Good to see you. How are you? Giovanno, we have partnered with Logos to release the Pastor Tanner study bundles in Logos Bible software. They're small, medium, and large. If you're interested, go ahead and check out these links. Good to see you, Giovanno. Thanks for swinging by. All right. Exegetical guide. So, boom, here's our textual variants. And here's our word by word. So this is perfect. We can utilize this to go ahead and grab keywords that we want to focus our attention on. And then, of course, we have a handful of commentaries that are really going to help us with this as well. Absolutely, Giovanno. I hope you enjoy. Now, I've selected large enough pericope here that I'm not going to be going super in-depth into the original languages. That's not the interest at this point, okay? We're just going kind of high level on the original languages. We're not, trying to go all the way in depth, all right? So we're going to utilize this to just get some key ideas of some words that might be important, okay? So let's highlight any words in the entire section that occur 30 times or fewer and see what our results are with that. That's still quite a few words. Let's go 20 times or fewer. What I'm trying to dial into here are the rare words, because rare words might grab our attention. So Caiaphas is just a name, not interested in that. Governor's headquarters, the Praetorium. This might be interesting. Okay. Proi, morning, early in the morning. That might be interesting just from a time of day standpoint. Here's the Praetorium again. So I kind of want to note Praetorium here. It's a somewhat rare word, and it pops up a couple times here in the section. So let's just go ahead and grab that lemma, copy it, and we'll throw it into our notes to look into. Key words, question mark. Okay, Praetorium. We also got early morning here. Here's Praetorium, that they would be defiled. Yeah, that's an interesting one here. They're hesitant because of the Passover, right? So interesting. Just one word like this, and these, what charge do you bring against him? Accusation or charge. Okay. None in 30, 31. What do we have here in 32? To indicate or signify what death he would die by. I like bringing up charge. I think it's going to come up again, though. Let's look. There's the Praetorium again. And then verse 36, the servant, the struggle or fight to stop him from being arrested, right? And then verse 38, grounds for charging him. So there are two different ones here. So I find no grounds for charging him. So I like this one. Let's go with the Itea and compare and contrast that with the charge itself. Okay, I think it's here. Yeah, the accusation or charge. So boom, got 3 key words that we want to dig into. Now, I've tried to include resources to help with these words that are going to get you the vast majority of what you're looking for without overwhelming you with depth. Okay, so DBL is one that we've included in both the Greek and the Hebrew, right? And so now we can actually just start looking at each of the words, and we'll do the Bible word study, and you guys will be able to see. So let's do Praetorium first. Oh, we want this Bible word study. Okay, there we go. And what do you have available to you? You have DBL for this is like your high level Greek sense. And then we've also got Liddell Scott Jones, which is going a little bit more in depth. Okay. So between DBL and Liddell Scott Jones, you should be able to get a majority of what you're looking for. But we've got a very special resource that I was able to get included even at the small level. And that is this bad boy by Thorolf Gilbrandt, the New Testament Greek English Dictionary. This one I find to be awesome. Look at how in-depth it is for New Testament usage, and it's written in a very accessible manner. It's got really good comparison and contrast, right? And so I really, really like this resource as well. So between DBL, Liddell Scott Jones, and then this one here in the New Testament Greek English Dictionary, I think you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck on digging into the original languages. So let's go ahead and look broadly at Praetorium. So it's almost always used in this context. Translated judgment hall. You can see it's in Acts and Philippians as well. Manifest in all the palace. Okay. But for the most part, concordance-wise, it's found just in this section in the Gospels, really, and then a couple places in the epistles. So not a very common one. Praetorium, governor's official residence, palace, praetorian guard. Okay, classical Greek. The praetorion was first known as the leader's or praetor's tent in camp and later became associated with the leader's official residence in the capital. Emperor Augustus's personal bodyguard became known as the Praetorian Guard. Augustus began with 10,000 soldiers, but Tiberius and others increased their numbers and improved the pay and working benefits. In New Testament usage, it's not referencing so much the individual guards, but it's emphasizing the palace or the temple or the space. Hello, Dharma. Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. What's good, Tanner? Hope you're well today. Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. Having a great day. How's your day? Thanks for swinging by. Praetorian, a Latin loanword not found in the Septuagint, occurs 8 times in the New Testament. 6 times it refers to Jesus' trials at the residence in the courtrooms of the Roman governors. See, this is what I find so valuable. Just this quick summary. So good. Some believe that Praetorion refers to the fortress Antonia, located near the temple complex, though it more likely refers to Herod's great palace on the west side of Jerusalem. In Acts 23:35, Praetorian refers to Herod's palace in Caesarea, the official residence of the Roman governors. In Philippians 1:13, it's difficult to determine whether Paul referred to the Praetorian Guard or the actual emperor's palace complex. Paul probably had the guard in mind rather than the palace, since he was most likely in custody of the official palace guard while he waited to appear before Emperor Nero. See, these summaries I find to just be great in Thorolf Gilbrand here. So we'll put this down for Praetorian. Boom, perfect. And then now let's look into these 2 words, the charge or accusation, and then the grounds for the charge, right? Yeah, good, thanks. Day just starting. That's great, Dharma. Yeah. Hope it continues to go well. And so then you can see LSJ here with a little bit more academic detail, and then the DBL just very basic, right? So I think between these 3 resources, a busy pastor is really getting what he needs. So we did this one. Let's now go to the one that was on accusation or charge. Pull this one up. And same thing. We'll go DBL, accusation, legal charge, okay. We'll go LSJ, accusation, charges were made against, liable to accusation, affirmative prediction, logic, predication, more frequent category, head of predictables, etc. Okay. And let's see what our sleeper resource here. Oh no, clicked the wrong one. That's the Pocket Lexicon. This is the one I'm looking for. Boom. All right. Accusation, charge, complaint, cognate, synonym, itia. Look at that. So they're actually considered synonyms. These 2 are considered synonyms, even though they look like a completely different lemma. So this one says that they might find an accusation against him. What accusation do you bring against this man? That's our text. Against an elder received not an accusation. Faithful children not accused of riot or unruly. Awesome, Giovanno. No problem. I'm here, but I watch the stream from the beginning on YouTube. No problem, Giovanno. Yeah, feel free to jump right in. Okay, word studies. Classical Greek. The noun can be found in many Greek writings from the time of Herodotus. Categoria is related to kategoros and means an accusation in the legal sense. It generally speaks of an accusation against someone with the recipient of the charge placed in the Greek genitive case. This term does not appear in the Septuagint. New Testament usage. New Testament appears 4 times, all of which carry the same legal connotation found in classical Greek usage. The Gospels, categoria is always used with Jesus as the target of the accusation, whether it is brought against the scribes, by the scribes and Pharisees, or by Pilate. The remaining 2 occurrences are Pauline and concern the proper ways and reasons for bringing a charge or an accusation against an elder. The serious tone of both passages indicates the high level of responsibility such position carries in the church. There you go. I think that is handy as well. So I just like these nice summaries because they give you a little bit to go off of if you're going to take it into the pulpit. And then also, of course, you can go a little bit more in depth if you would like to. Let's go one more word, and it's this itia word that I'm interested in. And same thing, DBL. Reason or cause of an event or state, reason or accusation, relation between 2 objects. So the reason piece of this is more interesting. Responsibility, mostly in a bad sense, guilt, blame, or imputation thereof. I think that's helpful. Let's just throw that real quick into our notes. And then this is the key one we want to get to again. Okay, shows categoria as the synonyms again. Okay, lots more times this one's used. This one shows 20. Lawful for a man to put away for every cause. In the case of a man to be with his wife, set up over his head his accusation written. Subscription of his accusation written over his head. Okay, that's interesting. So that's on the sign above Jesus as he was crucified. Although the noun aitia could simply mean a cause, a reason, or an opportunity, the definition that predominates in classical Greek is a charge or an accusation. The guilt or fault of the one accused is implied. And that comes straight from Liddell Scott that we just referenced. So perfect. And then let's go just a little bit further down to the New Testament. Understood aitia in its neutral sense of cause or reason, but they evidently were more familiar with its legal connotations. It can often be translated accusation or charge. Gospel writers made it unquestionable that Jesus was crucified unjustly without cause, although there was a charge on the placard above his head. There you go. Okay, perfect. So we kind of got our original language resources. We were able to highlight some of the key words that might be interesting. And there could be more, right? That's not exhaustive, but I'm just giving you a little bit of exposure to some of the ways in which to dig into this. Again, this resource in particular, I was very pleased that we were able to put this together in the study bundle small because I like this resource a lot. So that's original languages. Now, one of the other things I like to do when I'm getting a bigger picture of the passage is I like to get outlines. Outlines are really important to me. And so let's go. I have kind of three resources I'm interested in for this one. First is the Summarized Bible. All right. And I like the summaries that it provides here. The next one, I think this one's only in the medium package, but it's Wilmington's Outline Bible. Let's see if he has it. I don't think so. Yeah, not a problem. In one of the other ones, I have the Outlined Bible that will give you a little bit more detail on this stuff. The other one I really like is the Preacher's Sermon and Outline Bible. And again, it's just because I really, really like these outlines. Okay, so let's scroll down. And just see what they show for our pericope. Okay, it's right here. Peter's denial, the world's tragic denial. There's Annas, Peter again. Okay, and then it's going to be right after this section. Deeper study, Peter's denial, Peter's denial. Trial before Pilate. There we go, starting in verse 28. So you have Jesus was led into the palace or the judgment hall. To Jesus' accusers to hear their charges. So he's calling these out as movements, right? And this is Pilate back and forth, right? And that already gets my mind going, right? The indecisive Pilate. Look at Pilate and his back and forth in these small sections here, right? There's a lot of back and forth. So we'll dig into that here momentarily. First, let's go summarized. Jesus' betrayal and arrest, Peter's denial, Jesus condemned, and Barabbas released. And of course, we're focusing our attention for this week on these ones. Jesus, Judas, priests, officers, Pharisees, Peter, Malchus, Annas, Caiaphas, Pilate, Barabbas, a damsel. Walking through all the characters in this section. Conclusion. Our Lord Jesus, having put on the armor of prayer, went forth to face the great conflict with satanic hatred and the sin of the world. Betrayed, misunderstood, and denied by those of his own familiar friends, he, the perfect one, was handed over into wicked hands to face alone the condemnation of a guilty world, that those who should believe upon him might not be condemned. Ah, here you go. Key world. Betrayal, and arrest. Those come early on. And then strong verses. 11. 37. Ooh, yeah, that is a good one. So maybe we want to pay special attention to verse 37. And 38, because that's where Pilate says, what is truth? So that's helpful already. Striking facts. In Eden's garden, the first Adam sinned. In Gethsemane's garden, the second Adam suffered and prayed. In Eden, all was delightful and bright. Here, all was painful and dark. In Eden, there was disobedience, and the first Adam hid. Here, there was perfect obedience, and the second Adam presented himself as a spotless Lamb of God, ready for sacrifice. Perfect. So that was helpful. Now, I'm taking a different pericope than he has here. So one of the things we need to do is to understand through movement 4. Yeah, we need to understand the difference in what Pilate is doing between these two sections, because we're going to preach them separately. So first, let's move this over here so that we can dig into this. First, let's get just the broad outline. So let's go with exegetical outline. And for this one, because I'm going to be copying and pasting so many different sections, I'm actually going to turn off our... I have a hot key to the program settings in my other one. There we go. Let's turn off the copy citations for right now. Boom. Okay, so first we've got this. Then we've got this. Then this. Then that. And then finally, no, that's it. Movement 3. So to Jesus' accusers to hear their charges, to Jesus to hear his defense, back to the people to declare his innocence. So this is a very interesting back and forth that we're getting. Next time I preach on this, we're going to be covering these pieces. Back to Jesus to scourge and flog him. Back again to the people to offer a compromise. Back again to Jesus to investigate the possibility of supernatural being. Back again to the people to release Jesus. To the judgment seat before all to give the verdict of crucifixion. Right? So here we'll call like our first section here is something like, it's almost like the naive Pilate. Because here Pilate seems to think that this whole thing is going to go down just fine, right? Like, we're not going to have any problems. So these movements are all like, let's hear the charges, let's talk to Jesus, and let's come back and explain to them, hey, there's nothing wrong. It's not until you get to chapter 19 that you begin to realize that he begins to realize his naivete is lifting, right? So he goes back to Jesus to scourge and flog him. And then he goes to the people, hey, let's have a compromise. They state all sorts of things about him being God. And so now, Pilate has to investigate further. Then he still wants to release Jesus. And finally, they're not having it, right? So, Cal Magic, hello, good to see you. Welcome. Lacking the tone of delivery, what is truth is ambiguous in the English. Kind of like, let's eat grandma. You could say, let's eat grandma. which is completely different, right? I wonder if Pilate was being sarcastic or sincere. This is a great question, Cal Magic. It's good to see you, by the way. Yeah, this is one that I will definitely dig deeper into the commentaries, right? So let's see down here. We'll put this under kind of a separate section. I like that. By the way, Cal Magic, today we are highlighting. I don't know if you saw, I have partnered with Logos Bible Software to put together the Pastor Tanner study bundles. There are 3 of them, small, medium, and large. And today we're doing our sermon preparation with just the small study bundle. That's the plan. And so I'm showing people the resources that I hand selected in order for people to go ahead and be able to walk through, the text and get what they need to out of it. All right. Well, now I like this because we're starting to get the theme, right? So we've got our outline, roughly speaking, and we can understand kind of the movement back and forth. Let's go ahead and grab the verses that are involved in each of these. So for this resource, they've got verse 28. This is just kind of like a fact, right? Verse 28. Let's just make these sub points. And then this one, movement 1, is 29 to 31. And then movement 2 it's kind of like these are kind of transition verses, this 32 and 33. Let's see. Pilate scornful question. Well, he puts this here. So this 32 is kind of a transition verse. Yeah, verse 32 is very interesting. Let's put it up here with our other important verses. It's almost a prophetic verse. But then we have 33 through 38a. 33 through 38a. And then finally, 38b is the movement back to the people. And then I myself am treating 39 and 40 as separate sermons, right? So obviously the brunt of our sermon is going to be here, Jesus' defense. So once you start outlining this, you can get several ideas, right? So one of the things you can do is you could preach a sermon that focuses on, say, all 3 movements, right? And that could be like your 3 main points, if you're going to go with a more exegetically oriented outline rather than homiletical, right? But for me, you can also see the brunt of the verses have to do with Jesus' defense of himself, okay? And so you might just make that the entire sermon, and you could utilize these verses to provide essentially supplementary material, right? So there's a couple options here when it comes to how we want to treat the passage homiletically, how we're going to preach it, okay? But here's a good starting point with our exegetical outline. And again, this is part of why I included this resource here, because I like their outlines so much. Okay, well, once you have your exegetical outline, you want to try to work towards your homiletical outline. But I don't want to do the homiletical yet until we start digging into the commentaries and see how much material is available for each of the verses, right? Cal Magic. The advantage of building a large Logos library over the years. Pastor Tanner, large study package, $6.59. I love it, Cal Magic. That's awesome. Yeah, a lot of these resources are taken from other, well, like you said, the dynamic pricing really knocks it down. So that's fantastic. I love it, Cal Magic. I hope you enjoy it and get some value out of it. That's funny. Okay. Now that we've got our exegetical outline, again, the goal is to build a homiletical outline and a proposition. But it's at this point that I like to start getting some information for myself, okay? And the reason is if you could build the best outline ever, but then you build a nice homiletical outline and then you find with the commentaries and your digging and all that type of stuff, you find it really difficult to actually flesh out the outline with the information you want. And so then you kind of go back and edit your outline just because of pragmatics almost, right? So it's at this point that I'd now like to open the passage guide and show you some of the things I would do with the commentaries and resources that I've included, okay? So now we'll just throw our passage into the passage guide. John 18, 28 to 38. Boom, no problem. I don't know why it's not. There we go. That's what I was looking for. All right, there we go. Passage guide it is. All right. And let me show you some of the ones that I really focused the attention on. One sec, everyone. I'm going to be right back. All right, guys, I am back. Sorry about that. Somebody was knocking at the door. Kel Magic says, have you ever thought about the theological point that in Revelation, the new earth, the sun is not needed because the glory of God is sufficient, and how that ties into the light? Bible light language appears in the darkness before the sun is created. So I've thought about that point before, but not the light appearing in the darkness before the sun is created. Not that piece. Not tying it back to Genesis in that sense. That's interesting. I've thought about the sufficiency of God as the light, but again, not focusing my attention on the Genesis tie-in as much. That sounds very intriguing to me. Okay, so now we have done our passage guide, and this is where the individual commentaries that I've selected, I think are going to be really helpful for you guys. So my goal here was to get you a few good study Bibles that there's not a lot of overlap with. So I didn't want you to get just the same study Bibles. All right. And so if we look at the study Bibles, you have the Faith Life Study Bible. Okay. But you also have the CSB Disciple Study Bible. You have the Life Connection Study Bible, the Ancient Faith Study Bible. Okay. And I selected each of these for a particular purpose and a particular reason. All right. After the study Bibles, you have your single volume commentary, and that's your new Bible commentary. Okay. And of course, then you have your Preacher's Outline and Sermon Bible, which I showed you. But once you've got all of that locked into place, then your real commentary that's going to do the brunt work for you, that's going to be your Tyndale commentary here. Okay. So this is kind of the lineup, I thought. And again, for the small package, you're getting quite a bit here. I was thinking get some good study Bibles to get the high level, get a good single volume commentary. I've actually got a couple here. We've also got Matthew Henry, right? He kind of counts as a single volume commentary. Okay. And then that's when you also want to, at that point, you want to reference your Preacher's Outline and Sermon Bible. And that's where you'll grab, it'll be associated with your outline, but that's where you can get that one. And then you can jump into your Tyndale. Okay. So that was kind of the idea. I hand selected these, and we did include Jamieson, Fawcett, and Brown as well, right? So that can kind of give you like a higher level, broad overview as well. Okay. But these are kind of hand selected for you to kind of walk through and get certain treatment. All right. So even in the small study bundle, if you're preparing a sermon with only these resources, I think you're going to get a lot out of it. So let's walk through and see what we're able to get. So first, Faith Life Study Bible, 828 to 38. So brought Jesus from Caiaphas. The narrative does not report anything from Jesus' appearance before Caiaphas, perhaps because the author did not have access to anyone who witnessed it. Governor's residence, probably the former. So governor's residence here, this is the word that we took as one of our highlight words, right? One of our keywords, the praetorion. Translated here, governor's residence. Probably the former palace of Herod and the Great at the western edge of Jerusalem. Although Caesarea was the Roman Empire's regional base, the governor of Judea typically spent Jewish high feast days in Jerusalem because of the potential for civil unrest. All right. And these little pluses, these are reasons I like the Faith Life Study Bible so much. It integrates so well with other resources if you have them, right? And of course, we don't have them right here, but if you get the medium bundle, for example, I think this is included in there, etc. Right? So, these can expand. The Faith Life Study Bible gets better as you add resources to your library. Okay, political leaders in John, Annas, Caiaphas, and Pontius Pilate, and this shows their times. This might be a nice table to grab. So I'm going to put FSB 1828 table. Table. That's pretty handy. Not to be defiled. This jumped out at me, but I didn't take it as an original language note. So I didn't say, I'm definitely going to dive into this one. But let's see what it says. It says, according to Jewish law, being defiled would have prevented people from entering the temple to make sacrifices required for the Passover meal. It would also have prevented them from celebrating the meal with other Jews, who would have been concerned about becoming defiled from being in their presence. And then here you have another side note. Jews who followed the regulations of the Pharisees and some Sadducees believed that even being in the presence of a non-Jewish person could make them unclean, because Gentiles did not abide by their same regulations. The governor's residence may have been associated with defilement also because unclean food was prepared and consumed there. Okay. And then Dictionary of Biblical Imagery, which I have included, calls out purity here. So we'll grab that one as well. This one I think is a pretty important Bible dictionary, right? Purity in the Bible is primarily a concern of the cultic system, the means by which God's holiness is established and protected. From this origin, purity eventually became, especially under the influence of the classical prophets, a way of speaking about moral conduct. It's very interesting. You have that defiled language, right? And then, of course, here, purity is very important. Okay? Eat the Passover. According to Synoptic Gospels, Jesus' Last Supper with his disciples was a Passover meal. This meal then would be another one of the meals eaten during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which was also called Passover. Okay? So we might want to dig into defiled as a thing. Maybe, maybe not, right? And that might cause us, sermon preparation is iterative, right? So maybe we didn't pull the defiled word out for our word study, but in reading the commentaries, we realized that it might be an important topic. And so then we might go back in our word study and check out defiled in the original languages, right? All right. Eat the Passover. We already read that. Pilate, Roman governor from AD 26 to 36. I call these fun facts. People, don't hesitate to include these. These are clarifying for people. Verse 31 is not permitted. Because the Romans did not allow the Jews to carry out executions, the Jewish leaders bring Jesus to Pilate, who did have such authority. The later stoning of Stephen probably should have been viewed more as a mob action that the Romans ignored rather than an official sentence. This is in order to militate against some commentaries that have said that actually it might have been lawful for Jews to execute people, but just not in certain ways, i.e. crucifixions. Okay? But we could talk about that. And now a little further down. Yeah, here's where I'll start putting my information from commentaries. It is not permitted because the Romans did not allow the Jews to carry out executions. The Jewish leaders bring Jesus to Pilate. Verse 32 would be fulfilled that he had spoken refers to Jesus' earlier statement alluding to his crucifixion. In seeking Jesus' death sentence from Pilate, because that's where he says he's going to be lifted up. In seeking Jesus' death sentence from Pilate, the Jewish officials tacitly accept the Roman form of execution, leading to the fulfillment of Jesus' words. The Romans' execution of Jesus also would have fulfilled his prophecy because it would have been public enough for all to gather to him after his resurrection. A stoning or another accidental death organized by the Jewish authorities would have been too subtle for the story of Jesus' death to grow in enough renown for his resurrection to be widely proclaimed. That's quite interesting. The public nature of crucifixion is part of why Jesus wanted that to happen. I didn't think of the historical nature being as important. So that's an interesting thought. Chazzy, what is up? Good to see you. Been a minute. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for swinging by. All right. Let's go to 33. King of the Jews. The Jewish officials wished to execute Jesus primarily because he claimed to be the Son of God and the Christ, titles that evoked ideas about King David and God's anointed deliverer. Jesus was making claims to the throne. And look, we have the ISBE as well. Oh, it's in one of, I think it's in the large. I think the ISBE is in the large. I did include it, but it might only be in the large, not the small. How you been, Cal and PT? I'm doing great. Chazzy, yeah, doing really good. I'm actually showcasing. I was able to work with Logos to release a product here for people. It's a study bundle based upon my recommended resources. And so today we're featuring that while I do a sermon preparation using only resources from that study bundle. So we're doing really well. Okay. not of this world. So this one on the crucifixion, I think, is helpful because it shows it's a religious matter, right? Like you can kind of understand why Pilate would be so hesitant to move forward with their request. He's like, I don't care about your religious infighting, right? 36, not of this world. Rather than trying to rule the world as it is, Jesus is turning it into a new world. He's connecting the kingdom of God to earth. I think that's pretty powerful too. A new kingdom will mean judgment for those who chose the way of the current world and redemption for those who chose to believe in Jesus. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I agree. Verse 37, for this reason I was born. Jesus acknowledges that his ultimate purpose in life is to die for the people's sins. This fulfills his role as suffering servant, which John acknowledges throughout the gospel. Yep. Perfect. And he talks about truth, of course. How important truth is. Okay, so great material from the Faith Life Study Bible. The second one that I had included here is the CSB Disciples Study Bible. And I had this one included for a very specific reason. And that's because of the systematic theological nature of its content. So having systematic theological themes, Jesus Christ, revelation, Jesus Christ, salvation, called out here, I think is very helpful for people for preaching many of their sermons, right? Oftentimes, these comments and these ideas get overlooked, but if you can identify some sort of systematic theological theme, then you can utilize that to help you going forward, right? That's kind of how I think of that. Okay. Cal Magic says, tell your congregation that Matthew's where all the kingdom language is. I think 15 times in the Sermon on the Mount. You might want to check that. Oh, yeah. Because we're establishing the new kingdom is what they're pointing out here. Different kingdom is coming. Perfect. So you can see just at a glance, if you wanted to take your sermon in a systematic theological direction, more topical, the topic of Jesus Christ is obviously prevalent, but also the topic of revelation, one I would have missed, but this goes back to the predictions and the inspiration where it says this was to reveal what kind of death he would die, blah, 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 blah. So that's actually pretty valuable. And then not only that, salvation as a topic. Okay. So which one do we want to talk about? We were kind of focusing our attention on Pilate and the fact that he's going back and forth. We, of course, could focus our attention on Jesus and his defense of his position. So there's a couple good options here. Let's read what they have to say. It's only a few paragraphs, but this is why I've had this resource included. All right. Jesus Christ, death. Oh, and two different things, death and king. Okay. So if you wanted to preach topically, you could preach on who is Jesus Christ, and you could preach on the fact that he is king. And you could talk about the revelation of Jesus, and you could also talk about his death and how his death secures salvation. This would actually be a great pericope to just preach the topic of who is Jesus, right? And you'd almost be preaching it from Pilate's perspective. So that could certainly be an option. Okay, the Jews had the power of death by stoning. Let's actually put that down as a potential option. All right. The Jews had the power of death by stoning in matters of religious transgression. So there's the alternative interpretation to what was just said in the Faith Life Study Bible. I told you there was a difference of opinion on that one. It was to their advantage to have Jesus crucified as a political offender, thus nullifying his messianic following, or so they supposed. John knew the crucifixion was an outcome of Jesus' own prophecy as to what type of death he would die. Yeah, and so I kind of preached about this a couple of weeks ago, where I essentially said the Jews could put Jesus to death if they wanted, but they couldn't have crucified him, which to me is a different matter. So let's go CSB Disciples here. Revelation, Jesus Christ. Jesus revealed his own death, as all inspired predictions were fulfilled by God. As king, see note on Matthew 27:11. Jesus had his own definition of kingship. He did not threaten the Roman government, he threatened the religious rulers. His was not a physical kingdom based on war and violence. His is a spiritual kingdom establishing the truth in the world. Being part of his kingdom is knowing God, who is truth, and whom we know as Jesus. Pilate and the Jewish leaders rejected the truth and thus sealed themselves out of God's kingdom. I think this is an important part. If there's a new kingdom, its primary marker is truth. I think that's key. A primary marker of the new kingdom is truth. Hello, Rooster. Good to see you. Rooster says, morning or evening, wherever you might be. We are evening. Late afternoon, heading into evening. Cal Magic says, I know you're really busy, but Dr. Carmen Imes is doing a series on her YouTube channel that she suggests 2 books for beginners, academic, and scholar level for Old Testament, New Testament prophecy, and other categories. Great recommendations. I've picked up several of her suggestions. I'm going to check her out. I wasn't even aware of her. Cool. Thanks for sharing. Jesus said he came to defend the truth. Court language, it's around John 15. Yeah, in doing a word study, truth is a key word we need to focus on. Yeah, that's a good one. All right, finally, verse 37, acceptance. Acceptance of Christ means listening to him and obeying him. Yeah, very good. Okay, so not as much there. And of course, that makes sense. You know, this study Bible is more for systematic theological topics, and we're in a narrative section. So, you know, it's going to be more hit and miss there. Let's now head to this. This is the Life Connection Study Bible. I had it included. They might have mixed up which one I wanted. I wanted the one that has videos in it. Getz is the author of it. This is the one I wanted. Life Essentials Study Bible. They did include it. Cool. The reason I like this study Bible is it has videos. Okay. So you can actually click on this. It will take you to a link to the BH publishing group, and you'll get to watch the videos on particular sections of scripture. So I find that to be very valuable. Now you can see it didn't get included here because there's not a treatment of John 18. So that's why it didn't pop up in the passage guide. But know that this resource is here, and I really, really like these videos here, and they help you as you kind of walk through the topics, and then there's reflection response as well. So didn't pop up for our text, but this one, the Life Essential Study Bible, I really like. And then what's this other one that I pulled up? Life Connections by Lyman Cole. Very cool. Rooster says Tuesday morning is here for me around 10:40 a.m. and if you want an early edition, God is still on the throne and none can remove him. That's great, Rooster. I appreciate you. Let me know what's happening tomorrow right now. Much love. Cal Magic, you can insert some of your epistemological knowledge about knowing reality and truth. Remind them of your study on Meek's book so it ties together. I really like that. Truth is very, very important here, and you're correct. I've been studying this topic directly for some time. So if I do like a word study on truth, I need to talk about very explicitly what this means epistemologically, etc. Thanks for the reminder. Cal Magic, you're on fire today. Thanks for all the help. Okay, good. Let's do the Life Connection Study Bible. I want to say this one was included at Logos's discretion. I don't recall asking them to put this one in. Life Connection Study Bible are a revised and updated version of the best-selling and renowned Serendipity Study Bible. Maybe I did, though. Maybe I did. It's certainly different enough, right? I wanted a variety of study Bibles, right? So you'll see there's no CSB or ESV in here. What? Those are the best resources. I don't want to double dip for you, right? If you're getting the majority of what you would get in an ESV or a CSB out of the, Faith Life, then I can supplement with other study Bibles, right? That's my thinking behind that. And, some people might feel I made incorrect decisions on some of the resources to be included, but I want you to be able to get a lot of breadth in your study, and I didn't want a lot of repeat material or information. All right, headquarters. The Roman seat of power over Judea was located at Caesarea. However, this palace, so this is our word that popped out again, it's the Praetorium. This palace was Pilate's temporary residence in Jerusalem, a building Herod the Great had erected as a home for himself years before. Early morning. Jesus' trial before the high priest was either late at night or very early in the morning. The trial before Pilate probably began around 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, since the Roman courts began early. There's that would-be defiled language. Rabbinic tradition taught that Gentile homes were unclean, defiling any Jew who entered one for 7 days. In the Passover, according to chronology of this gospel, the Passover would be observed that evening. Any Jew ritually defiled would have to wait for a month to commemorate this feast. Lots of good, just historical background information with this one, right? So, good resource for that. Life Connection Study Bible. The Serendipity Study Bible. "1831. Judge him according to your law." Pilate's contempt for the Jews is seen throughout this story. He knew they had already tried Jesus, or they would not have brought him. His remark is a rebuke to their attempt to rush him into passing sentence. It's not legal for us to put anyone to death. So Pilate, yeah, he keeps trying. You can see immediately. He keeps trying he does not want responsibility for this. This is debated since the Sanhedrin did have extensive powers. But the fact that the Roman Empire held on tightly to the sole rights to pass judgment on cases involving capital punishment speaks in defense of this statement, right? And this is one I've already mentioned from the pulpit a couple weeks ago. So that Jesus' words might be fulfilled. Jesus used this metaphor of being lifted up as a means of describing his death. The Jewish method for killing an offender would have been stoning, but the Roman method for crucifixion fulfills the metaphor. Yeah, you can see good stuff in this Life Connections one. Are you king of the Jews? This was probably asked in sarcasm or surprise. The leaders must have told Pilate Jesus was claiming to be their new king and leader. This constituted the formal charge they were bringing against Jesus, representing him as a threat to Roman rule. So they're really trying to manipulate the system to get their way here. All right, good stuff. Now, you ready for a different kind of study Bible? We did the FSB, kind of a standard one. We did the CSB Disciples. We did the Life Connections. Now, the Ancient Faith Study Bible. The Ancient Faith Study Bible I grabbed because I think it's really valuable to get some early church fathers information, okay? And so here you're getting more isolated comments, but they're by early church fathers. And I really think our Protestant churches in particular do a great disservice to our people when we don't expose them to the early church. And so that's why I like the Ancient Faith Study Bible, and I had it included. All right, Chrysostom comments on verses 29 and 30, and then we have Tertullian on verse 36, and then 37 and 38, Cyril of Alexandria. A little bit longer comment. So let's read through what they say. First, Chrysostom. What madness! Why don't you mention his evil deeds instead of concealing them? Why don't you prove the evil? See how they always avoid direct accusations that would amount to nothing anyway? There's the point on truth again. Annas questioned Jesus about his doctrine, and having heard him, sent him to Caiaphas. After Caiaphas questioned him, and discovered nothing, he sent him to Pilate. Pilate asks, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" Here too they have nothing to say, but again employ conjectures. End quote. Very powerful. So this goes with truth. So what are the themes we're seeing? See, this is why before I create the homiletical outline, I start doing some commentary research. Because here, I was prepared to just talk about how confused Pilate is, going back and forth, back and forth. And this is a good exegetical outline of what's going on. But there's deeper material going on here, right? You have who is Jesus? That could be the whole sermon. You know, fresh exposure from new eyes, right? But you also have the kingdom of truth as a key theme that's represented here. And Chrysostom ties in perfectly into this kingdom of truth idea. It was a great quote. Tertullian, verse 36. If Christ exercised no right of power even over his own followers, to whom he discharged menial tasks, if in short, though conscious of his own kingdom, he shrank back from being made a king, he, in the fullest way possible, gave his own an example for turning coldly from all the pride and outward trappings as well of dignity as of power. So this is Tertullian on essentially being humble, right? It's a good one. And then finally we have here Cyril of Alexandria. You could even just entitle the sermon, "What is Truth?" Right? It's such an iconic statement from Pilate. Cyril of Alexandria. In order that he might show that the difficulty in Pilate's perception came from his stubborn heart and from his reluctance to admit the truth, Christ appropriately adds, "Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. For the word of truth is readily accepted by those who have already learned and love it. But it is not the same for everyone. In fact, the prophet Isaiah said to some, 'If you will not believe, neither shall you understand.' Pilate showed at once how true this was when he said, 'What is truth?' For there are those whose sight has been injured or who have entirely lost the use of their eyes and their sense of color has been entirely annihilated. They would not even be able to tell if someone placed gold before them or a brilliant precious stone. In fact, even the very light of the sun's rays does not engage them in any kind of wonder, since they have lost all perception and can gain no profit from any of these things. In the same way, to people whose minds have become warped, truth seems a foul and ugly thing, even as it instills a spiritual and divine brilliance in the minds of those who behold it." End quote. Great quotes from the early church fathers here. Notice how much work the Ancient Faith Study Bible has done for us. Pulled 3 fantastic quotes for us from the early church fathers, perfectly relevant to our text. And I'm thinking, guys, I want to preach on truth here. That's what I'm really getting passionate about as I'm reading all of the commentaries and everything like that. I want to preach on truth. What is truth, or the kingdom of truth, something like that. And now I'm thinking about it, just from my studies, I'm mostly aligned with critical realism. Now, critical realism has a certain take on metaphysics, and that is its realist approach. Okay? So it asserts that truth is not relative. It is obtainable. Well, it is independent of my own thoughts or subjective perception. But we have a problem. And this is the second component of critical realism. It's the critical piece. The problem is our ability to grasp the truth. This is tainted by the fall. our perception of the truth has been altered. How we perceive things. So then, what's the solution? Now, some people might say, God's word, right? Go to God's word. It has the truth in it. But I still have to grasp God's word. You see what I mean? There's still a problem. Just because God's word is truth doesn't mean there isn't a problem anymore. There's still a problem. Give me one sec, guys. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. I'm crowding the mic now. Here we go. This is good. So our problem is our ability to grasp the truth. Now, somebody might say the solution is the Bible, right? Because it's God's word is true. So yes, but this is only half the equation. Why? Because fallen human beings still have to interpret the Bible. We have to make sense of what it's saying, right? And that's one of our first problems. And there's a second problem. Problem one is this. Problem two is the Bible is not exhaustive on all subjects on which it speaks. In fact, it's not exhaustive on any subject on which it speaks. So you've got to work through these two problems as you present the Bible as the solution to, the fact that fallen human beings are trying to grasp truth that is independent of them. And then here's another thing people don't get. This is a feature, not a bug. Why? Because God's whole goal with all of this is that you be conformed to the image of his son. He's not simply concerned that you know the right things in your head. How you arrive at the right things is important. And he wants you to arrive at the right things through the Spirit. You see? So he makes it to where you have to tread the difficult path so that you can arrive at the truth for yourself. And in this sense, someone telling you the truth is not even necessarily the truth. You must have the insight yourself. So God gives us an unexhaustive scriptures so that we will plumb the depths of those truths and realities for ourselves so that we can have the personal insight, the aha moment, the light bulb, and thereby be transformed. So the Bible is deliberately and purposefully, I don't want to use this word because you're going to misunderstand what I mean, but the Bible is deliberately and purposefully obtuse, challenging, difficult. So that you can grow the spirit. Can grow the spirit within and discern truth from falsehood yourself. Is this making sense, guys? I'm kind of giving you a peek behind the curtain of my epistemology, kind of what you were talking about before, Cal Magic, with Meek Studies. But this is a lot of what I believe about, and it makes sense of it, right? And there's also a believe in order to understand piece here. And it's creating worldview lenses through which to interpret the truth or the facts in the scriptures. And that gets at this quote from that early church father right here, Cyril of Alexandria. That gets at what he's saying here. There you go. Cyril of Alexandria. All right, let's see what we got here. Sorry, I was in the zone. Thoughts were coming to my mind. I needed to organize them. I don't want to lose these ideas. I think they'll make it in the sermon. Let's see. God provides the broad truth, and we in our fallen state try to apply that truth. Our success or failure depends on our worldview. If it is pure or polluted and other factors, it works kind of like inductive logic where it starts out broad and narrows down. Makes sense? Killing it, Cal Magic. Absolutely killing it. Yes. Cal Magic, and outside the kingdom of truth, God is the world lies. So in the world, as New Testament, as N.T. Wright wrote, we have a longing for justice, a quest for spirituality, a hunger for relationships, and a delight in beauty. Only the kingdom of God can provide that. That's great. Cal Magic is spitting hot fire today. Love it. All right, cool. Let's let's keep going here. So that's the Ancient Faith Study Bible. That's for all the study Bibles we've got. Now let's go to the single volume commentaries. I put the new Bible commentary in here. It's one of the first ones I picked up and purchased. To this day, I really like it. And so, new Bible commentary I had included. I think it's good to have single volume commentaries. Similar to study Bibles, it gives you a broad overview, high level picture of what's going on. But I also want you guys to see something here. One of the things I'm trying to prove with this video is to show you guys how even with a limited resource set, you can write great sermons. And note that most commentaries represent grist for the mill. Your responsibility is not to just copy and paste what you hear in the commentaries into your sermon. Your responsibility is to use them as grist to create fresh, creative content yourself from your own soul as the Holy Spirit speaks through you, right? And so notice, even with a limited resource set, some of the best insights from our study today has come from me and Cal Magic and others as the Spirit works through us and tries to understand the text, and you put those things down. But it's the commentaries that fire your thoughts and your imagination. It's grist for the mill. It's food for thought, as we say. And so you do not have to have the biggest library, the latest and greatest, all that type. You don't. It's as the Holy Spirit moves through you and freshly inspires you, he uses the words of, those great saints that have gone down before us to inspire fresh thoughts for yourself, right? And of course, the words of the Bible. But notice as we go through and this person saw it this way, this person looked at it from that perspective, etc. He inspires our own thoughts. And then those sorts of things are the things that end up often making up your sermon, right? So just want to encourage you with that, because many people might be discouraged by the fact they don't have a large library. Guys, the small study bundle, I think, is $300. And I understand that's a lot of money for some people. But, it's $400, okay? But if you save up, I think you will find it worth it, and you can write great sermons off even just that one, right? For many, many years to come with just these resources. So, I'm a huge advocate for a large library, but if you curate and specially select those good resources that are going to help you, you're going to have a lot going for you for sure. I'm actually, man, I feel so inspired at the moment. There's another part on this, on the two problems, right? And this is all the denominations and different interpretations and ideas, right? Those are examples of the fallen human beings still struggling to interpret the Bible, right? Cal Magic, suddenly I'm listening to an infomercial. LOL, I love it. Chazzy Mac, I'm just sitting here impatiently. But wait, there's more. That's not my intention, guys. It's not my intention. I know I've spent thousands upon thousands in Logos, and I've talked to people before who say, man, it's just so expensive. I can't afford it, blah, blah, blah. And I can understand that perspective. But if you are selective about how you curate your library, you can get a lot of bang for your buck there. Anyway, I didn't mean to sales pitch. Sorry. You guys are funny. John's account of Jesus before Pilate is more detailed than the account in the Synoptic Gospels. He brings out the irony of the contrast between the scrupulousness of the Jews over Sabbath keeping, and their lack of scrupulousness in manipulating the system to achieve their own purposes. Yep, see, that's perfect. That's exactly what's happening. The first episode took place outside the Praetorium, the governor's residence. Pilate examined both the accused and the accusers. By remaining outside in the colonnade, the Jews avoided ritual uncleanness, but they were already defiled in their hearts through their plot to kill Jesus. Pilate's request to know the charges was perfectly reasonable, but the accuser's answer was not only evasive but insolent. Although the Sanhedrin had power to condemn a man to death, they were required to obtain the governor's sanction. John's comment in verse 32 implies that since Jesus had predicted death by crucifixion, events were overruled in the fulfillment. The second incident in the trial, a conversation between Pilate and Jesus, took place inside the palace, the Praetorium. Pilate's question, verse 33, should be understood to mean, do you claim to be king of the Jews? The notion of kingship was probably in the Sanhedrin's charge in order to implicate the governor, but Jesus made clear that his concept of kingship differed from Pilate's. If his kingdom were really a threat to the empire, surely Jesus would have organized a revolt. The words translated from another place mean literally not from here. The sense is clear. Jesus' kingship was of a different order from the world's kingdom. A spiritual kingdom does not need to be supported by physical force. There was an element of scorn in Pilate's question, but he was not prepared for Jesus' answer, introducing the concept of truth. Here is the only direct reference to the birth of Jesus in this gospel. Since the royalty of this world is not generally linked to the idea of truth, Pilate's question, what is truth, is understandable, although it is clear that he did not ask out of any real desire to know the answer. Nevertheless, he recognized no basis for the serious charge brought against Jesus by his accusers. Pilate's weakness of character is seen in the conflict between his judgment about the innocence of Jesus and his proposition to the Jews in verse 39. Do you want me to release King of Jews? Pilate purposefully used the title king, no doubt to show his contempt for the Jews. The word used to describe Barabbas is literally robber, but it had come to include political terrorists, hence the NIV's reference to rebellion. A violent man was preferred to the king of truth. Okay, so this is great. I don't know if you guys felt that way, but really, really good comments here. And this is the kind of thing you'll get out of the New Bible Commentary. Okay, there's our New Bible Commentary. I now, before we dig into Tyndale and some of the heavier commentaries, relativism in the Roman Empire, there you go, right? Let's now, I'm ready, I think, for our proposition, our main points, all that type of stuff. I think we've got enough. We have our exegetical outline here. Let's create our homiletical outline. Okay. And our homiletical outline is going to be, notice how different it is from our exegetical outline. Very important. We're going to call it the Kingdom of Truth. Tentative proposition. Because Jesus' kingdom is founded on truth, we should ensure that we do everything we can to uphold truth in our lives. We should uphold truth in our relationships. We should uphold truth in our church. We should uphold truth in our hearts. And I'm thinking like personal, lifestyle / convictions, something like that. So there you go. This is kind of a stereotypical Bryan Chapell By the way, we have included some preaching resources in this smaller one. So if you go mobile ed, you can see some preaching specific resources here. Introducing Biblical Preaching, right, by J. Kent Edwards. And then not only this, but in some of the later ones, the medium and large, you'll also get Bryan Chapell's as well. So it's not in this one, but it's in the other ones. And this is kind of the stereotypical Bryan Chapell proposition. What is true is Jesus' kingdom is founded on truth. What to do is ensuring we do everything we can to uphold truth in our lives, right? And then you hold half of the proposition fixed and you riff on the second half. And that second half should be subsets of your point here. So lives, and our lives, according to me, are made up of our relationships, church, and hearts, right? And these can be edited, right? So maybe it's not relationships, maybe it's like organizations or something, right? Of which the church is one. But you could also do like family. Cal Magic says Heiser's idea of believing loyalty in Bates' book Salvation by Allegiance Alone. Might be able to check those out. Okay. Where was I? Well, now that we've created our proposition, now I know we're focusing on truth. So now let's iterate and go back and look at truth when it comes to the original languages here. And then also we'll do our Bible dictionaries and use the fact book to dig into truth as well. So we'll come back to these last few commentaries to flesh things out, but we'll go back to the text and we'll Bible word study the text on truth right here. What is truth? Says Pilate. Boom. Okay. And I'll probably want the whole thing here, right? I'll probably end up clipping that entire chart and placing it. Okay, Aletheia. Let's go DBL. Oh no, I went to ITEA. Aletheia in DBL. Truth, that which is in accord with what really happens, facts that correspond to a reality, whether historical in the time-space continuum or an eternal reality not limited to historical fact. That's great. So that's a DBL, just a very basic lexicon, but I didn't want to give anyone anything fancy when it came to your lexicons. I just wanted good, solid stuff that'll help you. DBL Greek we just did. Liddell Scott Jones now. Here you go. Aletheia, truth as opposed to a lie or mere appearance. And there are several examples of that. Truth of persons, truthfulness, sincerity. Truth personified. Symbol of truth. Jewel worn by Egyptian high priest was a symbol of truth. So you can see lots of different examples in Liddell Scott Jones. Where is it? I lost it. Oh, it's over here. And then finally, let's look it up in our New Testament Greek English Dictionary, which I told you guys is one of my favorite resources to get added into this one. Truth, dependability, freedom from error, integrity. Okay. There's a lot here in the Septuagint. Grammatical forms, concordance with lots of different verses where it talks about it. I'm not going to go through these because there's 109, so there's no need to go through all of them, but I want to get down to the section below. Classical Greek, one of the principal terms for expressing the concept of truth in the Greek language is aletheia. Originally, the word denoted something which was not hidden or a disclosure of something which was hidden. In Greek philosophy, the word often carries the sense of that which really exists, the reality behind all apparent reality. Therefore, it has been customary to conclude from this that there's a marked contrast between the Greek and Hebrew view of the nature of truth. According to this view, in classical Greek, aletheia stands in opposition to that which is only apparent or perceived to be real. The Hebrew notion of truth points to that which is sure and reliable as the truth. No doubt this is substantially correct, but it would be erroneous to assume that aletheia should solely or principally imply a philosophic concept of reality. Obviously, Greeks as well as Hebrews needed a word which decisively expressed truth over against falsehood and deceit. Such a concrete sense can also be discovered in the Greek aletheia, just as it can in the Hebrew emet. Both of these terms have distinguished shades of meaning which are worthwhile to investigate. Aletheia functions in various contexts. To the philosophers, it expressed being in the absolute sense of the word. Existence. Historians use the term to signify real events as distinct from myths. In forensic language, legal, the term characterizes an accurate assessment of fact. In contrast to an incorrect observation or assertion, aletheia not only stands for irrefutable facts, but it also expresses the truth itself, that which is unattainable to the human mind and which can only be perceived in ecstasy or through divine revelation. Septuagint usage. The nearest analogous Hebrew word for the Greek aletheia is emet, although other words like tov and sadiq are also translated by aletheia word group in the Septuagint. Sometimes even emet is translated by other Greek words like pistis, since under certain circumstances emet means truth and in others faithfulness. This must reveal something about the nature of the word itself. It often happens that truth and faithfulness join together whenever a word and deed correspond. Added to this picture is the fact that the Old Testament's emet is fundamental expression of the character of God. Emet is combined with chesed, grace, at times. This combination of chesed and emet probably formed the background of the phrase grace and truth in the prologue of John's Gospel. The Old Testament concept of truth is linked to the covenant relationship between the Lord and Israel. God binds himself to his spoken word and is faithful toward his covenant people. The people of the covenant are likewise expected to be faithful to the terms of that agreement. New Testament usage. The faithfulness which the God of Israel showed to his people and his covenant is a historical manifestation of the truth of God, his emet. When the implications of this word via the Septuagint and common traditions in Judaism are transferred to the Greek term aletheia, this adds another dimension in the New Testament's use. The word the authors of the New Testament borrowed had little of the abstract or theoretical nuances associated with the Greek term. Least of all would aletheia have been understood to have a Platonic sense of occurring in some timeless sphere or in some prehistory. Truth occurred in the history of mankind and was revealed in the mighty saving acts of God. The New Testament further presents truth as the divine will of God and as the proper response of humanity in fellowship with God. Thus, truth and ethics become inseparable. God and the truth belong together, just as the sinful man is characterized by living a lie. Most important for the New Testament is that aletheia expresses the revelation of the truth of God in Jesus Christ. Through the incarnation, the truth of God became flesh. This reminds me now of, we talked about the Bible, and Jesus is the true word of God, right? So it's actually number 3 problem. So the feature not a bug piece probably needs to be presented here. And then here we have the third problem, which is associated with this previous thing, and that's that Jesus is the Word of God made flesh. This cannot be contained in words on a page alone. Jesus is dynamic, and we will never exhaust his person and character. Something like that. Got that out of here. Neither aletheia nor any of its forms appear frequently in the Synoptic Gospels or in Acts, but the words are much relied upon in the epistles of Paul. About 1/2 of the instances of this word group happen in the Gospel and epistles of John. An examination of places where aletheia is used offers a profitable sketch of the implications. It denotes that which is true and correct, that which is certain and on which one can depend, that which is pure and genuine. But principally, the concept of truth found in the New Testament centers on Jesus Christ. Grace and truth came by Jesus Christ, who is himself the way, the truth, and the life. It's so good. Yeah. Come on. How helpful is this resource, guys? Big fan. Boom. So we got all our aletheia stuff, which is going to be the one word we really want to focus on. Now that we've done that, let's look up truth in the fact book. And see what hits we get based upon our dictionaries, okay? So our dictionaries here. All right. Our dictionaries here, first key passages. We'll see if we get any cross-references on truth. We're probably not interested in too many cross-references. It's just a common theme in the Bible. Yeah, I'm not interested in these. Let's go to our dictionaries. We have the New Bible Dictionary. We have Easton's. We have the New Dictionary of Theology. And again, we already showed earlier that one of the dictionaries you have is the Dictionary of Biblical Imagery, right? So let's reference these ones and see what we get. New Bible Dictionary, it is kind of the companion volume to the New Bible Commentary, right? So it kind of comes from the same pedigree, if you will. Truth, like its relation, knowledge, is used in the Old Testament in two senses. The intellectual, of facts which may be ascertained to be true or false, or far more commonly, the existential and moral, of truth as the attribute of a person. Joseph's brothers are detained in prison that your words may be tested whether there is truth in you, i.e. whether they are dependable, consistent, of reliable character. It is significant that of the Hebrew words translated truth, the latter is sometimes rendered by the EVV as faithfulness, English versions. So, and they give example, Deuteronomy, Hosea, etc. The Old Testament thinks much more of the basis of truth in a reliable person than of the mere facts of the case. See, that's helpful. A reliable person. In Hebrew, truth is more focused on a reliable person. That even goes to the point I was making about Jesus. Even in Hebrew language, the focus is much more on the reliability of an individual person rather than abstract facts of the case. All right, continuing. This reliability is basically an attribute of God, whose truth reaches to the clouds. The God of the Bible is thus very far removed from the capricious pagan deities. He is true, i.e., consistent, both in his loving care for his children and in his implacable hostility against sin. It is no far cry from truth as an attribute of God himself to one of his activity. So he judges truly, he sends forth truth. His word is true in the sense that it is permanently valid. As though thou art truth, so is thy word truth, for it is written, thy word, O God, stands fast in the heavens. Truth is demanded of man as his response to God in obedience to the law and in his inmost nature, and is the bedrock of all human relationships. In Greek literature, the words for truth, aletheia, alethes, alethinos, do not have the same personal and moral connotation. Rather, truth is intellectual. It is the full or real state of affairs. So there's the difference between the Greek and the Hebrew, right? Greek is more focused on the real state of affairs or the facts. As in judicial language, the aletheia is the actual state of affairs to be maintained against different statements, so historians use it to note real events as distinct from myths, and philosophers to indicate real beings in the absolute sense. In the New Testament, these Greek words occur commonly and bring with them both their Old Testament and their classical and Hellenistic Greek meanings, so that it is often an extremely delicate matter to decide which nuance predominates. It is possible, however, to distinguish three broad senses in which the words are used, even though these may overlap. Dependability. Man, great background here. Dependability, truthfulness, uprightness of character, etc. Truth in the absolute sense of what is real and complete as opposed to what is false and wanting. And then finally, the adjective, alethinos, especially sometimes carries the Platonic sense of something real as opposed to mere or appearance or a copy. Okay, that's great. So here we go. New Bible Dictionary. There's some great information there. I also wanted to show you guys, I didn't pull it up, and I don't feel the need to because I feel like we got everything we needed in our lexicon references. But we also do have a bridged Kittle. Okay, a bridged Kittle in this one. And it's the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, but it's the abridged version, right? And so, actually, now that I'm looking at it, I might want to reference it. Let's just read the first few little bit here. The common Old Testament word for truth appears some 126 times. It denotes a reality that is firm, solid, binding, and hence true. With reference to persons, it characterizes their action, speech, or thought, and suggests integrity. In law, the word is used for A, the actual truth or cause of process as shown by the facts. Only rarely is there a more abstract use, whether there is any truth in you. Normally, the facts establish a matter beyond cavil, as also in the case of God's word. Regard for facts is indispensable for the right dispensing of justice. An extension of this usage is to more general facts which demand recognition by all people as reality, as the normal state corresponding to divine and human order. The religious use runs parallel to the legal, but is not just a figurative application of it. It often denotes religious reality that need not be explained by the forensic use. The righteous base their attitude to God on incontestable truth and practice truthfulness as God himself is truthful. Truth is linked with knowledge of God. If it is fundamentally an attitude, the rational element in the legal use ties to the instruction of the law. Thus, walking in truth can be taught. Truth can be set in opposition to deceit. Poetic expressions have truth springing from the ground or falling to the street, da-da-da-da-da. But of course, this one also brings up the differences. The original Greek usage and its differentiations. Etymologically, meant non-concealment, and thus denotes what is seen, indicated, expressed, or disclosed. Usage of dualism, so the more Platonic sense, genuine reality, as opposed to the mere appearances. So I think for Plato, my room is full of mere appearances, but there's a genuine reality beyond it. the World of Forms, early Christian usage. I think this is good. I'm going to pull this. I might be able to go through very briefly some of the early Christian usage in Aletheia, talking about what it means. Nice. Okay, good. So we're done with our word study now, and we got good information out of the New Bible Dictionary. I don't think we need to go further there, although there is another dictionary to be referenced if you would like. And again, we got that from the fact book, wherever I put the fact book, right here. So there's also the New Dictionary of Theology, which is great, right? And yeah, there's good material here too, I'm sure. But it's now time to finish up with our commentaries, and I want to make sure we reference at least Tyndale, and then we can start to finalize our homiletical outline. Okay. So Matthew Henry's concise commentary on the Bible, I think is real valuable, and the concise piece is helpful, right? Because he can be very verbose. Verse 28 to 32, it was unjust to put one to death who had done so much good. Therefore, the Jews were willing to save themselves from reproach. Many fear the scandal of an ill thing more than the sin of it. Christ had said he should be delivered to the Gentiles and they should put him to death. Hereby that saying was fulfilled. He had said that he should be crucified, lifted up. If the Jews had judged him by their law, he had been stoned. Crucifying never was used among the Jews. It is determined concerning us, though not discovered to us, what death we shall die. This should free us from the disquiet about that matter. Okay? That's fine. Does he talk about truth? Yeah, down here. He conquers by the convincing evidence of truth. He rules by the commanding power of truth. The subjects of this kingdom are those that are of the truth. Pilate puts a good question. He says, what is truth? When we search the scriptures and attend to the ministry of the word, it must be with this inquiry, what is truth? And with this prayer, lead me in thy truth, into all truth. But many put this question, who have not patience to preserve in their search after truth. I think he means persevere. Persevere in their search after truth, or not humility enough to receive it. By this solemn declaration of Christ's innocence, it appears that though the Lord Jesus was treated as the worst of evildoers, he never deserved such treatment. Boom. So we'll throw this in here. Just some thoughts from Matthew Henry. We also have Jameson Fawcett Brown available to you. Okay, decent high-level overview, single-volume commentary as well. But now I wanted to show you the standout commentary that I had included, and that's Tyndale. And the reason I included Tyndale is because, to me, it's really good bang for your buck. It's got really good commentary, but also the price is relatively low on it. So you can get a full Bible commentary set for a relatively cheap price, right? Especially since it's included in the study bundle. Cal Magic, I can't remember the last time we went over 2 hours. You must really be enjoying your study. Indeed. I also I wanted to give people a, I guess, front to back look at the study bundle, Cal Magic as well. So I wanted to highlight not every resource, but a lot of them, if that makes sense. So I also wanted to make this, a good exposure for people to the study bundle and the resources themselves and how you can come up with a great sermon with something like this, right? So, but yes, I'm also very much enjoying the study. Not a problem. Although I can tell I'm getting tired. Let's finish off here with Tyndale. And you can already see, look, multiple paragraphs on a single verse, right? And let's look at the quality of the commentary as well. I think you're really going to like this one. Tyndale is a really good bang for your buck commentary set in my experience. In 1824, we are told that Jesus was sent bound by Annas to Caiaphas. The evangelist provides no account of Jesus' trial before the high priest Caiaphas in the Sanhedrin, recorded in the other Gospels. From the very earliest times, this was seen as problematic. In a few later manuscripts, verses 13 to 27 in chapter 18, have been rearranged to overcome this problem. However, such rearrangements are not found in the Greek manuscripts and are not supported by the best or the majority of manuscripts. So that's helpful. Omitting any description of the trial before Caiaphas, the evangelist says, then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. The word translated palace, praetorion, is a Greek transliteration of the Latin praetorium, which was a term used for military headquarters, or in Pilate's case, the residence of the prefect. I mean, look how helpful these comments are, very detailed. Pilate normally resided in Caesarea Maritima, but during major Jewish festivals, he would take up residence in Jerusalem. The actual location of the praetorium in Jerusalem is debated. It could have been either the Antonia fortress abutting the northwest corner of the temple complex, or what was previously Herod's palace on the western wall of Jerusalem, right? I could get another image at this point. So I had done images. The first was, it was just a small, I put it down here. There it is. It's this table. I'll actually cut it out. Faith Life Study Bible table on governors / emperors. The next one, though, is going to be this maps comparing locations of the praetorium and see Tyndale Cruise. Perfect. Okay, let's keep going. By now, it was early morning. Early morning translates proi, which denotes the fourth watch, 3 to 6 a.m. according to the Roman division of the night. If we interpret proi strictly according to the Roman division, it'd mean that Jesus was brought to Pilate before 6 a.m. It was not unusual for Roman governors to begin their duties very early in the morning. Bringing Jesus to Pilate's palace / praetorium involved problems for the Jewish leaders. To avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. To enter a Gentile house was believed to cause ritual uncleanness, which would prevent them from eating the Passover. The Mishnah says the dwelling places of Gentiles are unclean, a footnote adding because they throw abortions down their drains. To enter a Gentile house could mean contamination because of a dead body. Contamination of this sort rendered one unclean for 7 days and would have prevented the Jewish leaders participating in Passover that evening. So for this reason, they did not enter the palace or praetorium. There is a terrible irony here. The Jewish leaders were being scrupulously careful not to contract ritual uncleanness while making themselves guilty of a far worse crime, seeking the death of an innocent man, their Messiah. That's a really, really good point. Maybe put it here. Uncleanness irony. 29 to 32, the first episode. Because they would not enter the palace, Pilate came out and asked them, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" The whole exchange which followed between Pilate and the Jewish leaders took the form of challenge and riposte. Pilate's demand to know what charges they brought was met with a riposte from the Jewish leaders. If he were not a criminal, they replied, we would not have handed him over to you. Apparently, they expected Pilate to confirm their decision about Jesus, that he was a criminal, without their advancing any specific charges. And so they answered Pilate in this insolent way. This is a really good point as well. Not accepting their insolent response and challenging them instead, Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." In effect, he was saying, "You have decided in the light of your own law, without any need of my judgment, that he is a criminal. So judge him yourselves, execute him yourselves." Pilate knew that the Jewish leaders did not have the authority to do this. So, if in this first exchange he prevailed, as they were forced to acknowledge, we have no right to execute anyone, right? So, if read that way, he's trying to prove a point. But again, there are some that say, they do have a right to perform capital punishments. The only exception to this rule was an authority given to them to execute Gentiles who ignored the prohibition excluding Gentiles from the court of women and the court of Israel. Other instances of people being put to death by the Jewish leaders are what appear to have been a lynching in the case of Stephen, or an execution between the rules of the prefects Festus and Albinus in the case of James. Well, there you go. He answers it explicitly. So that's Cruz's take. He thinks they genuinely are not allowed to execute anyone. Commenting on the inability of the Jewish leaders to carry out the death penalty, the evangelist says this took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. If they had been allowed to carry out the execution, it would have been by stoning. But Jesus had already said that he was to be lifted up, a reference to crucifixion. This would only occur if the death penalty was carried out by the Romans. Maybe that the Jewish leaders wanted Jesus crucified to show that he was under the curse of God. I said that in my sermon like 2 weeks ago. All right, 33 to 38a. The second episode, Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Up until this point in the narrative, no formal charge had been mentioned. Pilate's question, "Are you the king of the Jews?" presumes that the Jewish leaders had brought the charge of treason against Jesus. That is, that they represented him as a rival to Caesar. Jesus' response was to ask, "Is that your own idea, or did others talk to you about me?" Jesus was not, oh, this is so good. Jesus was not intimidated by Pilate and questioned about the source of his information. Look how this verse ties in exactly to what we were talking about on It's a Feature, Not a Bug. That's a good one. Jesus was not intimidated by Pilate and questioned him about the source of his information. Pilate's first reaction showed his exasperation or perhaps his disdain for the Jewish people. "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. Next, he pointed out the shameful situation in which Jesus found himself. "Your own people and your chief priests handed you over to me." Finally, reflecting a judicial system which presumed guilt rather than innocence, he asked, "What is it you have done?" Jesus rejected the shame Pilate heaped upon him, assuming he had done wrong, and replied, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders." In fact, he had already rejected the attempt by Peter to prevent his arrest. Jesus added, "But now my kingdom is from another place." (1836b) is better rendered, "But now my kingdom is not from here." By so saying, Jesus was indicating that he was not a present threat to Pilate. Augustine comments, "He did not say my kingdom is not in this world, but that it is not of this world. Indeed, his kingdom is here until the end of time, and until the harvest, it will contain weeds. And this could not happen if the kingdom were not here. This is the kingdom of which he said, my kingdom is not of this world. My kingly power does not come from here." What's up, Jess? How you doing? Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Are you home or are you still out? Augustine is affirming two things: that God's kingly rule is present and active in this world, in the here and now, and that its kingly power derives not from human sources, but from God. Seizing upon Jesus' reference to my kingdom, Pilate says, "You are a king then." If Jesus acknowledged that he was a king, Pilate would have something substantial to deal with. Jesus responded, "You say I'm a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth." Pilate wanted an acknowledgement from Jesus that he was a claimant to a political kingship. Jesus refused to be pinned down in this way. Instead, he said that he had come as a witness to God's truth, and he informed Pilate that everyone on the side of truth listens to me. Thus, he challenged Pilate to stop listening to the manufactured charges of his accusers and start listening to him. In this exchange of challenge and riposte, Jesus emerged as victor, and Pilate was reduced to confusion. "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. Just got back from a hike and checking in. Love to seeing you in the zone. Cal Magic said something similar. I'm almost done. I'm going to do this small paragraph and end. Additional note, my kingdom is not of this world. Most interpreters recognize that Jesus' statement, my kingdom is not of this world, implies that his sovereignty, his kingly authority, is not of a worldly, political nature, but rather derives from God. Often this is taken to mean that he was not referring to a realm, but only to a kingly rule. However, these things are not mutually exclusive and need to be held together. Mitchell offers several reasons why this is so. 1, a king cannot rule nothing. 2, where the expression my kingdom is found in the Septuagint, it often includes a realm or a people. 3, when Jesus, This is not going to be relevant to my sermon, right? This is too nuanced of a argument, right? Boom. There we go. All right, guys. If we go here now to our homiletical outline, I think we're on the right track. And now it's just going to be about fleshing out our homiletical outline in terms of relationships, organizations. I'm going to change this to organizations right now. I prefer it. And then hearts, personal lifestyle and convictions, right? Because Jesus' kingdom is founded on truth, we should ensure that we do everything we can to uphold truth in our lives, right? Homiletical outline, the kingdom of truth. Boom. That's it, guys. Let's go ahead and go to the big screen. So we went a little long today, and the point and purpose was to show you guys what kind of sermon you can write, you can prepare, utilizing just the resources in the Pastor Tanner study bundle, small. There is also the medium and the large. I intend to do sermon preparation on the medium and large in the future as well. And so you can see how those additional resources kind of can flesh out your prep process. But you can see we're essentially there, right? All we need to do at this point now is flesh out our illustrations and our applications. There are some resources to do that, especially in the medium and the large bundles. But we've got our outline. We've done our research and our commentaries. We've got lots of material that we can use to flesh this out in terms of explanation. So we're essentially there in terms of where our study needs to be. We got there relatively quickly. We tapped high-level resources, a lot of information, and yeah, I just wanted to use this to kind of highlight the small study bundle. Like I said, in the future, we'll try to do the medium study bundle and the large study bundle as well. And I appreciate you guys hanging out with us here. I will do a video in the future on my thought process behind the resources that are included in each of the bundles. And, feel free to reach out with feedback on whether or not you thought I put together a good one. But at the end of the day, it was meant and intended to help you guys out, especially if you're with the small bundle, if you're on limited resources, right? Because you can get a lot if you pick the right resources. All right. I appreciate you all so much. Thank you for supporting us here at the Pastor Tanner YouTube channel. You guys are awesome. Appreciate you also on Twitch. And thanks for hanging out. I had a blast and really enjoyed all of our conversations and discussions. I thought we learned a lot, and you guys added a lot as well. I think this sermon's going to come together pretty nicely. I'm really looking forward to preaching it already. You guys are fantastic. Thank you all so much, and we'll catch you all again real soon. All right? Take care. God bless.